The helicopter was going down, and Lieutenant Kate Ross had about 15 seconds to make peace with dying in a country that didn't officially have American military personnel operating within its borders. The MH-60 Blackhawk spun through the night sky, trailing fire and hydraulic fluid, its rotors screaming protest as the pilot fought for control they'd already lost. Kate could see the mountains rushing up to meet them, dark, hostile, and unforgiving. She'd spent 8 years as a Navy SEAL, proving she belonged in the world's most elite fighting force. Now she was about to become a statistic, another operator lost in a mission that would never appear in any official record. But as the Black Hawk disintegrated around her and the Afghan mountains prepared to claim another victim, Kate Ross made a decision that would define everything that came after. She wasn't going to die here. And the enemy forces hunting her were about to learn a lesson that SEAL instructors had been teaching for decades. You can drop a SEAL anywhere on Earth, but they will always find their way home, even if they have to fight through an entire army to do it. The mission had been straightforward on paper, which should have been Kate's first warning. 8 years operating with naval special warfare had taught her that straightforward missions were myths told to new recruits who still believed in easy victories and clean extractions. Infill at 0230 hours, the briefing officer had said, gesturing at the topographical map of the Kunar province. You'll insert via Blackhawk at grid reference Victor Tango 47. Conduct reconnaissance on suspected weapons cache, collect intelligence, and extract at 0600 hours from the same location. 6 hours, in and out, nobody sees you. Kate had studied the map with the intensity that had kept her alive through 3 deployments. The landing zone was in a valley surrounded by mountains that rose like walls on all sides. Limited approach vectors, limited escape routes, the kind of terrain that turned straightforward missions into disasters if anything went wrong. What's the opposition force estimate? She had asked. Local militia, maybe 20 fighters, low-level training, basic weapons, nothing your team can't handle. That should have been her second warning. In Kate's experience, intelligence estimates were always optimistic by a factor of at least 2. 20 fighters probably meant 40. Basic weapons probably included RPGs and heavy machine guns. And nothing your team can't handle usually translated to, we're sending you anyway because the mission is politically important. But orders were orders. And Kate had learned early in her SEAL career that you didn't refuse missions just because they looked difficult. If SEALs only took easy assignments, they wouldn't be SEALs. The team had loaded into the Black Hawk at 0200 hours. Kate as team leader, Senior Chief Marcus Reaper Johnson as her second in command, and 4 other operators whose skills complemented each other like pieces of a precision instrument. They'd flown through the Afghan night in silence, each operator running through mental checklists, reviewing contingencies, preparing for the hundreds of small decisions that would mean the difference between mission success and getting killed. Kate had done this insertion profile dozens of times. Fast rope from the hovering helicopter, move to rally point, conduct mission, extract. The SEAL teams had perfected the technique over decades of operations. It was as routine as anything could be in a profession where routine could kill you if you got complacent. The first indication that tonight wasn't routine came when the Black Hawk crossed into the valley and the night suddenly lit up with tracer fire. "Taking fire! Taking fire!" The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, professional calm despite the circumstances. "Multiple positions, heavy machine guns." The Black Hawk banked hard, the pilots executing evasive maneuvers that threw the operators against their restraints. Kate watched through the open door as green tracers arced up from at least 6 different positions, not 20 fighters with basic weapons, more like 60 fighters with heavy machine guns positioned in a coordinated ambush. "They knew we were coming," Reaper said over the team frequency, his voice tight with controlled anger. Kate's mind raced through implications: compromised intelligence, leaked operational plans, an ambush specifically designed to bring down American aircraft. This wasn't a reconnaissance mission anymore. This was a trap, and they'd flown right into it. "Abort, abort," the pilot called. "We're taking critical damage. I can't maintain." The RPG hit the tail rotor with a sound like God's hammer striking an anvil. The Black Hawk immediately began spinning, the pilots completely losing directional control. Kate felt her stomach drop as the aircraft went into an uncontrolled rotation, the world outside the door becoming a nauseating blur of mountains and tracers and darkness. "Brace for impact!" the pilot screamed. Kate grabbed the restraint webbing with both hands, pressed her body back into the seat, and did the mental calculation she'd trained for but hoped never to use: how to survive a helicopter crash in hostile territory. The answer was simple and brutal. You probably wouldn't, but if you did, you had to be ready to fight the second you hit the ground. The Black Hawk hit the mountainside at an angle, skidding sideways through rocks and scrub vegetation. Metal shrieked, rotors shattered, the fuselage crumpled like aluminum foil. Kate felt impacts all along her body, her shoulder, her hip, her helmet striking something solid. The world became a chaos of noise and motion and the peculiar floating sensation that came with violent trauma. Then everything stopped. Kate hung upside down in her restraints, ears ringing, tasting blood. Her first conscious thought was simple: I'm alive. Her second thought was more complex: for how long? She triggered her restraint release and dropped onto what had been the ceiling of the Black Hawk. Her body inventory came automatically: move fingers, move toes, check for arterial bleeding, assess mobility. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken or punctured. Combat luck, the kind that ran out eventually, but hadn't run out yet. "Sound off," she croaked into her radio. "Team status." "Reaper, up." Marcus Johnson's voice, strained but functional. "Davidson, up. Legs messed up, but I can move." "Chen, up." Silence from the other 2 positions. Kate crawled through the wreckage toward where she'd last seen them. The helicopter's internal structure had collapsed, creating a maze of twisted metal and shredded wiring. She found the first operator, Mitchell, crushed beneath a section of bulkhead, eyes open and empty. The second, Taylor, wasn't breathing, his neck bent at an angle that told Kate everything she needed to know. 2 KIA, 4 survivors. And from outside the wreckage, she could hear voices speaking Pashto, getting closer. "We've got enemy approaching," Kate transmitted. 30 seconds to contact. Grab weapons and ammo. Prepare to move. She pulled her M4 carbine from where it had wedged against a seat frame, checked the chamber, still loaded, still functional. Her sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226, was still holstered. She had 4 spare magazines for the M4, 3 for the pistol. Not enough for a sustained firefight, but enough to make their exit expensive for whoever tried to stop them. Kate crawled out through a rent in the fuselage and took stock of their tactical situation. It was, in a word, catastrophic. The Black Hawk had crashed halfway up a mountainside, leaving a scar of torn earth and scattered debris. Below them, Kate could see flashlights and hear shouted commands, at least 20 fighters climbing toward the crash site. Above them, the mountain rose steeply into darkness. The pilots were dead. Kate could see them through the shattered cockpit, bodies broken by the impact. That left 4 operators against an enemy force of unknown size in terrain that offered limited cover and no support. Reaper materialized beside her, his face bloody but his eyes sharp. Assessment. "We're fucked," Kate said with the bluntness that SEALs appreciated. "But we've been fucked before. Rally point is 3 kilometers north. We move fast, we fight smart, we might make it. And if we don't? Then we die expensive." Kate checked her GPS. The device had survived the crash, showing their position as a red dot in a sea of hostile territory. The nearest friendly forces were 60 kilometers away, across some of the worst terrain in Afghanistan. "Get everyone mobile. We move in 2 minutes." Those 2 minutes stretched like hours. Davidson, the operator with the injured leg, bound his wound with combat gauze and accepted the reality that he'd have to keep pace or get left behind. Chen distributed ammunition from the casualties, making sure everyone had at least basic combat load. Reaper rigged thermite grenades to the Blackhawks' radio and computer systems. If they couldn't have the intelligence, neither could the enemy. The voices below were getting closer. Kate could see the first fighters reaching the debris field, silhouettes moving cautiously through the wreckage. They were looking for survivors, for intelligence, for anything valuable they could recover from the American helicopter. "Time's up," Kate said. "We move." Combat intervals, noise discipline. Anyone falls behind, we carry them. Nobody gets left. Clear? 3 voices confirmed. Kate took point, leading them up the mountainside away from the crash site. Behind them, she heard the thermite grenades ignite with a distinctive whoosh, destroying anything of intelligence value and hopefully buying them a few more minutes before the enemy realized the survivors had already moved. The mountain was steep, rocky, and completely unforgiving. Kate's body protested every step. The crash had left her bruised and battered, moving through terrain that would have been challenging even fresh. Behind her, she could hear Davidson struggling, his injured leg making every step an exercise in pain management. But he kept moving, because that's what you did. SEALs didn't quit just because things got hard. They'd made maybe 200 meters when the shooting started. Muzzle flashes erupted from below. The enemy had found their trail and was engaging with a volume of fire that suggested Kate's estimate of 20 fighters had been wildly optimistic. Bullets cracked past her head, sparked off rocks, filled the night with the distinctive snap buzz of near misses. "Contact rear," Reaper called, dropping into a firing position and returning fire. His M4 chattered in controlled bursts, the suppressor keeping the muzzle flash minimal, but not eliminating it entirely. Kate saw at least 2 enemy fighters drop, but more were coming up the slope. "Leapfrog movement," Kate ordered. "Reaper Chen, suppress. Me and Davidson move 50 meters, then we cover your movement. Go." It was a fundamental SEAL tactic, bounding overwatch, one element moving while another provided covering fire. They executed it with the precision that came from years of training, moving up the mountainside in controlled increments while the enemy tried to swarm them from below. But there were too many enemy fighters and not enough SEALs. For every hostile they dropped, 2 more appeared. Kate could see the tactical mathematics developing. At this rate of consumption, they'd run out of ammunition long before they ran out of targets. "We need to break contact," she said over the team frequency. "This is a losing equation." Ridgeline, 200 meters northeast, Chen called out. Natural choke point. We can hold there, limit their approach vectors. Kate checked her GPS, confirmed the terrain feature. It wasn't great, but it was better than trying to fight uphill while outnumbered 10-1. Moving to the ridge. Chen, your rear security. Make them pay for every meter. They climbed with desperate speed, lungs burning, legs screaming protest. Davidson fell twice, each time forcing himself back up with the grim determination of a man who refused to be the reason his team died. Kate grabbed his arm, helped him over a particularly steep section, felt his weight, and knew he was running on nothing but willpower. The ridgeline appeared ahead, a knife edge of rock that offered some cover and limited the enemy's ability to flank them. Kate collapsed behind it, immediately setting up a firing position. Reaper came over the edge next, then Chen, then Davidson, who half-crawled the last few meters. "Count!" Kate ordered. "4 up!" came the responses. Still alive, still fighting. Below them, the enemy was regrouping, silhouettes moving through the darkness. Kate could hear voices, someone giving orders, organizing the assault. Professional, coordinated, nothing like the disorganized militia the intelligence briefing had described. "These aren't random fighters," Reaper observed. "This is a trained unit." Kate had reached the same conclusion. The tactics, the discipline, the coordinated fire. This was a military force, probably foreign advisors training local proxies, which meant they were facing competent enemies who knew how to fight and wouldn't make easy mistakes. "Situation assessment," Kate said, keeping her voice clinical. "We're 60 clicks from friendly forces across hostile terrain. We have maybe 200 rounds per person. We've got 1 wounded. No air support, no quick reaction force, and an enemy company hunting us. Options?" "We could try to evade," Chen suggested. "Move at night, hide during day, work our way north. With Davidson's leg, we'd be too slow. They'd run us down in a day, maybe 2. "We could find a defensive position," Reaper said. "Ford up, make them pay in blood for every approach. Then we die when we run out of ammunition." Kate looked at each of her teammates. "Or we do what SEALs do best. We attack." The silence that followed wasn't disagreement. It was consideration. Attacking when outnumbered was insane by conventional logic. But SEAL operations had never followed conventional logic. The entire philosophy was built on small teams doing impossible things through superior training, superior tactics, and superior violence of action. "There's a village 3 clicks northeast," Kate continued, studying her GPS. "Intelligence said it's a logistics hub for the local militia. Food, weapons, communications equipment. If we hit it hard and fast, we can resupply, grab a radio that works, and call for extraction." "Or we walk into another ambush," Davidson said. "Maybe. But sitting here, we're dead in hours. Moving slow, we're dead in days. This way, we choose the time and place of engagement. We take the initiative. We remind these assholes why they should fear the night." Kate could see the calculus happening behind their eyes, weighing risk against reward, certain death against probable death, the comfortable despair of defensive positions against the terrifying hope of aggressive action. "I'm in," Reaper said finally. "Beats dying on this rock." "In," Chen echoed. "In," Davidson confirmed, his voice tight with pain but steady with resolve. Kate felt something cold and hard settle in her chest, the emotional state that SEALs called combat mind, where fear transformed into fuel and uncertainty became clarity. They were probably going to die. But they were going to die fighting, and they were going to take a lot of enemy fighters with them. "Check your gear," she ordered. "We move in 5 minutes, and when we hit that village, we hit it like the wrath of God." They sat in silence on that Afghan mountainside. 4 battered SEALs surrounded by an enemy that wanted them dead, preparing to attack against odds that would have made conventional forces surrender. But SEALs weren't conventional forces. They were the sharp end of American military power, the operators who did impossible things because someone had to do them. Kate checked her M4 one more time, ensuring every system was functional. The weapon was an extension of her body, a tool she'd used so many times it responded to thought as much as physical input. She had maybe 150 rounds remaining. Against a village full of enemy fighters, it wouldn't be enough, but it would have to be. Because Navy SEALs always found their way home, even if they had to carve a road through hell to get there. The village appeared in Kate's night vision as a cluster of mud brick structures arranged around a central courtyard. She counted 12 buildings, most single-story with narrow alleys between them. Good fields of fire if you were defending, death traps if you were attacking. But the SEAL teams had been attacking defended positions for decades. They knew how to make the impossible look routine. 3 sentries, Reaper whispered, his voice barely audible even over the encrypted radio. 2 at the north entrance, 1 on the building with the antenna. That's probably their communications center. Kate studied the village through her scope, identifying patterns, lights in 4 buildings, vehicles, 2 pickup trucks with heavy machine guns mounted in the beds, movement suggesting at least 20 fighters, possibly more inside the buildings. We go in hard and fast, Kate decided. Reaper, you and Chen take the sentries, suppressed weapons, simultaneous engagement. Davidson, you're overwatch from this position. You see anyone trying to organize a defense, you drop them. I'll move to the communications building. Secure radio equipment. That puts you alone in the middle of the village, Davidson observed. That puts me where I need to be. Kate checked her watch. 0347 hours. On my mark, we execute. 3, 2, 1, mark. Reaper and Chen moved like shadows, circling to opposite sides of the village. Kate watched through her scope as they approached the sentries with the patience of predators. The 2 guards at the north entrance died within a second of each other, suppressed rifle shots dropping them before they could raise alarm. The sentry on the communications building lasted longer. Chen had to close to knife range, climbing the outside wall like a spider before the blade found its target. Sentries down, Reaper confirmed. Village is asleep for now. Kate moved forward, her M4 up and ready, every sense tuned to maximum sensitivity. The village smelled of wood smoke and livestock and the particular stench that came from poor sanitation in confined spaces. She could hear snoring from one of the buildings, voices from another, someone awake, talking quietly. The communications building was in the center of the village, 2-story, with the antenna array Reaper had identified. Kate reached the entrance and paused, listening. Silence from inside. She tried the door, unlocked, which was either carelessness or a trap. Inside was a single room that had been converted into a command center. Radio equipment lined one wall, some of it military grade, some civilian. Maps covered another wall, marked with positions and routes that Kate recognized as planned ambush sites. A laptop sat open on a desk, screen glowing with what looked like intelligence documents. Jackpot, Kate whispered. I've got communications equipment and intel. Give me 2 minutes to... The explosion cut off her words. Not close, but not far either. Somewhere on the village perimeter. Then gunfire, the distinctive chatter of AK-47s, followed by the sharper crack of M4s returning fire. Contact north, Davidson's voice on the radio. Multiple hostiles, at least 30. They were staged outside the village. Kate's stomach dropped. They'd walked into another trap. The village wasn't a logistics hub. It was bait, and they'd taken it. Reaper Chen, fall back to my position, Kate ordered, already grabbing the laptop and a handheld radio. We consolidate, fight our way out. She burst out of the communications building just as the village exploded into chaos. Lights came on in every building. Doors burst open as fighters poured out, grabbing weapons, organizing with the speed of a force that had been expecting attack. Kate counted 20 visible targets, probably more she couldn't see. An enemy fighter appeared from an alley to her left. Kate pivoted, put 2-round center mass, kept moving. Another fighter on a rooftop. She engaged, saw him drop. The night vision gave her an advantage in the darkness, but only briefly. Already the enemy was adapting, using flashlights and muzzle flashes to illuminate targets. Reaper materialized from the shadows, his M4 firing in controlled bursts. Where's Chen? Haven't seen him since. Chen's voice cut through on the radio, tight with pain. I'm hit. East Alley. Can't move. Kate made the decision in half a heartbeat. Reaper, suppressing fire. I'm getting Chen. Kate, there are 40 hostiles between you and... I know. Suppress. She ran toward the East Alley while Reaper poured fire into the enemy positions, his M4 on full automatic now, burning through ammunition to buy her seconds. Kate vaulted over a low wall, slid around a corner, and found Chen propped against a building with his hand pressed against his abdomen. Blood. Too much of it. Stupid, Chen said through gritted teeth. Walked right into a burst. Didn't even see him. Kate grabbed him by the tactical vest and started dragging. Chen was compact but solid muscle. Moving him was like dragging a sandbag that bled. Enemy rounds sparked off the walls around them. Kate returned fire one-handed, her M4 chattering, buying them inches of progress toward cover. They made it 20 meters before Kate's luck ran out. She felt the bullet hit her left shoulder, not the sharp pain she'd expected, but a massive impact that spun her around and dumped her on the ground. Her M4 clattered away, lost in the darkness. For a moment, Kate couldn't move, couldn't think, could only process the fact that she'd been shot and wonder if this was how it ended. Then, training took over, training that had been drilled into her through years of pain and repetition until it lived deeper than conscious thought. She rolled to her sidearm, the P226 coming out smooth, despite the screaming protest from her shoulder. A fighter appeared around the corner. She double-tapped him. Another fighter on a rooftop. She engaged, saw him fall. The pistol felt too light after the M4, but it still put rounds where she pointed it, and right now that was all that mattered. Kate! Reaper's voice, somewhere close. Where are you? East Alley! I've got Chen, but I'm hit. Reaper appeared like an avenging angel, his M4 firing, dropping 3 enemies in as many seconds. He grabbed Chen with one hand, provided covering fire with the other, somehow making it look effortless even though Kate knew it was anything but. They made it to the communications building, the only structure offering real cover. Davidson had repositioned there, his rifle cracking methodically as he engaged targets with the precision of a man who'd accepted he was probably going to die and was determined to make it count. Kate did a quick assessment. Chen was gut-shot and going into shock. Her own shoulder was a mess of blood and torn flesh. Davidson's injured leg had reopened, leaving a trail of crimson. Only Reaper seemed relatively intact, and he was down to his last magazine. Situation? She asked, keeping her voice level despite the pain. Completely fucked, Reaper said with dark humor. We're surrounded, low on ammo, and they're organizing for a final assault. But I got the radio working. Hope flared. You can reach friendly forces? Better. I can reach a Predator drone that's been circling about 30 clicks north. Gave them our position, requested immediate fire support. How long? 12 minutes, maybe 15. Kate looked at her watch. 0421 hours. 15 minutes might as well be 15 hours against the force assembling outside. She could hear commands being shouted in Pashto, fighters being organized into assault teams. They'd learned that rushing the building got them killed. Now they'd do it properly, suppressing fire, grenades, then a coordinated assault that would overwhelm the 4 SEALs through sheer numbers. Can we hold 15 minutes? Davison asked. Kate checked her remaining ammunition, 2 magazines for the pistol, maybe 40 rounds total. Chen was in no condition to fight. Davidson could shoot but not maneuver. Reaper had 1 magazine. Against 40 or 50 enemy fighters, the math was brutal. We hold, Kate said simply, because the alternative is dying, and I'm not ready to do that yet. She moved to a window, breaking out the remaining glass to create a firing position. The village courtyard was filling with fighters, all of them preparing for the final assault. Kate could see their leader, a tall man in better gear than the others, giving orders with hand signals that showed military training. When they come, she said over the team frequency, we make every round count. Aim for center mass, fire in controlled pairs, prioritize anyone who looks like leadership. We're not trying to win. We're trying to survive long enough for the cavalry to arrive. And if the cavalry doesn't arrive, Chen asked, his voice weak, then we fought well, and we'll be remembered. Kate chambered around in her P226. but I'm betting on the cavalry. Air support has never let us down. The enemy assault began with a barrage of RPGs. Kate watched the rockets arc toward their position, slammed herself flat as they impacted. The building shook, dust and debris raining down. One wall partially collapsed. But the structure held, old mud brick absorbing impacts that would have destroyed modern construction. Then came the fighters, moving in coordinated fire teams, using cover and movement the way professionals did. Kate engaged from her window, her pistol cracking. She saw at least 2 fighters drop. Reaper fired from a different angle, his M4 methodical, despite having limited ammunition. A fighter made it to the building, tried to come through a breach in the wall. Davidson shot him point blank. Another fighter appeared on the roof. Kate engaged upward, saw him fall. The assault wave broke against their position, pulled back, regrouped. Kate used the respite to reload, her hands steady despite the pain from her shoulder. She'd lost track of how many enemies she'd engaged, how many had fallen. The numbers didn't matter anymore. Only survival mattered. 8 minutes, Reaper called out. Drones inbound! The enemy came again, this time with more determination. Kate emptied her pistol, reloaded with her last magazine, kept firing. The world reduced to fundamentals. Target, aim, shoot. Target, aim, shoot. There was a purity to it, a simplicity that combat veterans understood but could never explain to anyone who hadn't experienced it. Her pistol locked back empty. No more ammunition. Kate dropped it, grabbed Chen's M4. He was unconscious now, wouldn't need it. She had maybe 15 rounds in the weapon, 15 rounds and a knife against dozens of fighters who knew they had the Americans cornered. 5 minutes, Reaper said. We just need 5 more minutes. The building wall exploded inward. Kate was thrown back, her ears ringing, vision blurred. She saw fighters coming through the breach, their weapons up, death in their eyes. She raised Chen's M4, started firing, dropping the first 2 fighters through the breach. Then her M4 ran dry. Kate drew her knife, a 7-inch fixed blade she'd carried through 3 deployments. It felt inadequate against AK-47s, but it was all she had left. A fighter came through the breach. Kate moved inside his rifle, drove the knife up under his ribs, twisted, withdrew, let him fall. Another fighter appeared. She couldn't reach him before he could fire. Reaper's M4 cracked, dropping the fighter. "I'm out," Reaper called. "No more ammunition." They looked at each other across the ruined building. 2 SEALs with knives, 1 SEAL unconscious, 1 SEAL barely mobile, and an enemy force preparing for the final assault that would overwhelm them through sheer numbers. "It's been an honor," Reaper said. Kate was about to respond when she heard it, the distinctive whine of a Predator drone's engine, high and distant. Then, the world outside the building erupted in fire. Hellfire missiles struck with surgical precision, each one obliterating an enemy position. The drone circled overhead like an avenging angel, its sensors identifying targets, its weapons erasing them. Kate watched through the breach as the village transformed into an inferno, enemy fighters running, dying, their coordinated assault dissolving into panicked retreat. "Friendlies in the building!" Reaper was shouting into the radio. "Do not engage the central structure." "Friendlies inside," the Predator acknowledged, adjusted its targeting. The strikes walked around their position in a circle of destruction, creating a cordon of fire that no enemy could cross. Within 3 minutes, the assault had been completely broken. The survivors were fleeing into the mountains, abandoning their weapons, their vehicles, their wounded. Kate sank down against the wall, her body finally acknowledging the injuries she'd been ignoring. Her shoulder was a mass of pain. Her vision was graying at the edges, but she was alive. They were all alive. "All stations, this is Reaper," her second-in-command said into the radio. "We have wounded requiring immediate medevac. Village is secure, but we need extraction now." The response came back within seconds. "Reaper, extraction birds are inbound. ETA 20 minutes. Hold position." Kate allowed herself a small smile. 20 minutes. They could hold for 20 minutes. They just held against impossible odds for hours. 20 more minutes was nothing. She looked at her team, Chen unconscious but breathing, Davidson barely conscious but alive, Reaper battered but unbroken. 4 SEALs who'd been dropped in enemy territory, surrounded, outgunned, and left for dead. But they'd fought, and they'd survived, and in 20 minutes, they'd go home. Because that's what Navy SEALs did. They always found their way home. The Black Hawk medevac thundered through the dawn sky, carrying 4 battered SEALs toward the nearest medical facility. Kate sat strapped to a litter, an IV in her good arm, morphine taking the edge off the pain. Beside her, Chen was intubated, stable but critical. Davidson and Reaper sat against the bulkhead, both receiving treatment for their wounds. The crew chief leaned over, shouting over the rotor noise. "Ma'am, the pilot wants you to know that was the gutsiest thing he's ever seen. 4 operators holding off a company-sized enemy force. That's going in the history books." Kate shook her head weakly. "It's going in a classified file that nobody will read. That's how these things work. Maybe officially, but word gets around. People will know." She closed her eyes, letting the helicopter's vibration lull her toward something that wasn't quite sleep but wasn't quite consciousness either. People would know. Other SEALs would hear the story, learn from it, add it to the collective knowledge that kept them alive in situations that should kill them. 3 months later, Kate stood in front of a classified awards board, receiving a medal that would never appear on her official record. The mission had been scrubbed from all documentation. Officially, no American forces had been operating in that region of Afghanistan. The destroyed village was attributed to infighting between militia groups. But in the SEAL community, the story spread. The team leader who'd been shot down fought through enemy territory, attacked against impossible odds, and brought her team home alive. Some of the details got exaggerated. That was inevitable. But the core truth remained. Navy SEALs always found their way home, even if they had to fight through hell to get there. Thanks for watching. Every woman has a story worth telling. Join us to hear them all.